And ESPN's Anthony Slater joining us here on ESPN 1320 Sacramento Sports Leader. Anthony, how's it going, man?
What's up, fellas? How are you?
Doing all right. I've got my sea legs under me. Rough start to the Monday. I had to take a nap in the parking lot before work. That's how my week started.
Better than the Kings,
but I'm
though.
catching up now. Doing better than the Sacramento Kings somehow.
Is it a nap? If I assume we're talking at 6, 7 a.m., I feel like that's just extension of sleep still.
Yeah, well, I have an hour and a half commute to work. So
I do too. I feel that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we do the opposite. I live out in Oakley and I work up here in Roseville. And then I know you live up here and then go out to the Bay for work. So you understand. So I did the drive and then I got here and I was like, Jesse, I need a minute. I took a little nap.
How to make a play. It's all good.
Yeah, man. And now we're here. And Doug Christie is going to be here next year, it looks like. Is there the big question for us today, Anthony, has been whether that third-year option on his contract is in play or not. Is there any indication that they're going to give him that additional year, or is it 26, 27, and then they'll figure it out beyond that?
I mean, he's a coach to, through the summer and into next season. I don't know that they need to exercise the option. I mean, it's Doug Christie's kind of in a unique situation as a head coach. Like, this is the place that would give him this job. And he's so committed to, the Kings as a franchise. I don't know that necessarily, if there's other suitors out there, if he was like a hot name that could go take another head coaching job, maybe, negotiations and, options and new deals would be on the table, but that's not necessarily the case.
Finished 22-60, not a great year or anything like that, of course. But are they bringing back Doug Christie because they want to, or more because they can afford to, given their current situation?
Yeah, I think there's several reasons. I mean, obviously, the contract is relatively team friendly from a head coaching perspective. I think that the young guys, took to him late in the season. I think that's the way they played down the stretch, and particularly the guys this franchise is prioritizing. Right, you're talking about all the rookies, Renaud, Cardwell, Clifford. Like, they kind of thrived in the last a couple months, and they're flipping this roster over. We all know who matters and who doesn't necessarily matter in the next 12 months for the Kings. Those young guys matter. The draft pick coming up matters. Keegan Murray matters, and I think they're viewing the situation of those guys kind of positively this season, despite the record. The veterans very likely are going to kind of be flushed out of here over the next year or so. I don't think they mind that either. And I think they're giving Doug Christie a low stakes chance next season, right? Because there's not going to be a ton of, volatile pressure, even locally next year, for them to make a run to the playoffs necessarily. They just want to see young guys do well first round, this top lottery pick, look like he is a potential future star. Like, that's what matters. And I think they're giving Doug Christie a chance to prove he's at least the guy for that type of job.
Anthony Slater joining us here on The Jump. It's ESPN 1320 Sacramento Sports Leader. So is there, we were talking about this earlier, is there some, I don't want to say expectation next year because that's too grand of a word, but is there would have to then be some sort of, maybe not a win number that he needs to get to, but there would have to be some sort of improvement, right? Like, I can't envision a world where they win 20 games and they're like, yeah, we figured it out. Doug's the guy.
I mean, usually in sports, it's kind of about a feeling, right? And I think once you guys were watching next year's team, you'll on a day-to-day basis, especially as fans and, followers and media members around the team, you could just kind of feel if this is trending where it needs to or it's not. You could tell me they're 10-20 in the first 30 games, but if that includes AJ DeBanza looking like unbelievable and scoring 22 a game because they got him, and Keegan Murray's kind of looking like they've resuscitated his career to a degree and he's healthy, and they're just losing games down the stretch against veteran teams, but you're like, man, this young core looks like it's something. Like, that's a fine 10-20, but if it's the first round pick is kind of in and out of the lineup and he's just not that good, and Murray's still kind of stalled, and they're still kind of cantankerous around the veterans, and they haven't been able to flip the roster much this summer. There'll be a lot more angst around it. So again, I don't know that it is a pure win-loss number. It's just a who is looking like what type thing next season, if you know what I mean.
Do you think next season is make or break for Doug Christie getting to that next contract, or do you think there's a spot where it's like, oh, they still don't know in year 2, and you pick up that third-year option for Doug and figure it out then?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, make or break in a sense. I mean, you can't just, like, they can't have another disappointing, 22-60 season and feel like they're not necessarily going anywhere. I mean, this is Doug Christie certainly, let's say, is kind of coaching for his head coaching career in a sense, because as I mentioned, he's not, when he got the job, he hopped from a fourth assistant coach, back of the bench to a Kings job where, again, this is, I think, the only place that would have given him that job at that time. So, yeah, I mean, he's on a short-term bargain type deal, which means, yeah, it's prove it. It felt very prove it this season. And I think the franchise felt to a degree he proved something that they wanted to see in the last couple months. And they're giving him kind of an extended run at it, but nothing is cemented in stone long-term.
Talking with Anthony Slater, covers the Warriors, covers the Kings for ESPN, covers the NBA, and does a great job. Was it 8 teams this year that finished with 55 or more losses? Is this the NBA is going to try and do something about tanking this offseason, right?
Yeah, May 28th, apparently, right? They're going to, the problem is these solutions are they're I couldn't even sit here, and it would take the whole segment to explain all the mathematical equations that they believe are going to, change incentives. The truth about next year, though, regardless, if they change some lottery, odds or not, which they are going to do, but next year the draft is a lot worse, so there's less appeal to plummet to the bottom. And then some of these teams clearly have to pivot off of it just from organizational. We've seen it in their actions, right? The Jazz, for example, they trade for Jaren Jackson. They're going to, reconfigure and go for it a little bit more next year. We know the Pacers are going to be back trading for Zubac, getting Halliburton back. They're not going to be tanking. The Wizards, they trade for Trae Young. They trade for Anthony Davis. You can just get a feeling there organizationally that ownership's done with this part of the rebuild and they need to speed it up. So I just think the landscape next year is just going to create fewer teams trying to plummet towards the bottom, plus the draft. And also, I think that's a situation that might benefit the Kings, because I think they're naturally not going to necessarily be that good next season. And that could mean, they could still kind of go for it, try to develop the youth, but might just kind of fall into, a bottom 4, bottom 5 record, and won't be as competitive to get down there, if you know what I mean.
What do they make of the years that the rookies had this season? Maxime right now was rookie of the month, could potentially be an all-rookie team. Are they still kind of wait and see? Or do they feel like these are he could potentially be built around?
I don't know about built around, but it's positive. I'll probably vote him all rookie second team. I was thinking this is ballot week for me. I need to figure out exactly what I'm doing. But to get him in the second round, at minimum, I think he's a really solid backup big. I think we'll probably get a better idea next season if we're talking, really starting center caliber. But, he can score. I'm curious how you build the defense around him long term. But he's a piece, and they don't have a ton of young pieces. So to find one in the second round is positive. Nick Clifford, kind of an up and down rookie year. I think he showed he can, be a bench guy probably next year. And we'll see if he develops, but they still got a long ways to go. To me, they don't have their future 1A, 2 type stars. And obviously, they need to that's priority number 1 for this franchise is nailing this draft pick coming up, because there are a lot of guys up there. We all know that people think are build around type guys, and they need to make sure they get one of them.
How much of a priority is it for them to move off of the bloated contracts that they have? Zach LaVine, Domantas Sabonis.
Yeah,
DeMar's not necessarily a bloated contract, but a vet type.
Yeah, DeMar's, because they're really kind of right up against the tax, and you're not in a situation you want to be paying tax and having apron talk. So DeRozan with just the $10 million guaranteed, obviously, I think is very vulnerable just because of the fact that they need to shed some money to reconfigure the roster a little bit, and he's the easiest to shed and save a bunch. LaVine suddenly becoming and expiring, it's a player option, but expirings are way easier to deal in this market. So they could get off him, but also, you could, next season is not, as we've talked about, it's not some make or break season for the franchise, at least. So if you have to just kind of eat an expiring and then you get cap space in the following summer, I'm not sure you necessarily want to add a huge deal with multiple years on it just to get off an expiring deal. So I would say that they're in a better place to trade some of these deals because they're all 1 year closer to expiration.
Anthony Slater, ESPN, joining us here on The Jump. Last thing, one of the big stories that I think maybe the biggest offseason story in the NBA is going to be Giannis Antetokounmpo. Is there a chance the Kings see him 4 times next year in a Golden State uniform?
Chance, yes, but I think one of the important details, Shams had a long story about it. My colleague, and he noted that Miami was the closest, right? When it came down to deadline day, when Milwaukee was saying yes or no, they were only thinking about the Miami deal, and Hero where in the picks.
Right.
The Warriors had kind of, and I assume, yes, the Warriors will re-enter the conversation in the summer, but I assume Miami will too, right? They're almost like they're equivalents, really. They're both the 10 seeds going into this play and kind of in this wacky place. So, I think Milwaukee's already shown they might like that deal a little bit more. But, what happens lottery night? What if the Warriors lose in the play and they get a top 4 pick? What if you're the Warriors? Are you saying, oh, well, now that's on the table and that's a huge gem of an asset? But also, if you're the Warriors, like, would you put that top 4 pick on the table, or should you start to think about the future a little bit more? So, I think in a lot of ways, including for the Bucks, by the way, who want to get, a top 5 pick themselves. Even, they have this weird situation where the Hawks are getting the highest of them and the Pelicans. So the Bucks can't get the first pick, but they could get the second pick theoretically. So what happens on lottery night, I think for a lot of teams will determine their future, their trade packages, all that. But, I guess to wind back to your question, the Warriors will be in the hunt for Giannis. I would not consider them the favorite, though.
Anthony Slater does a great job covering the NBA for ESPN. Kind enough to take a few minutes out of his Monday morning to join us here. Slates, appreciate you, man.
Thanks, Anthony.